Hello everyone, it's New York Railfan 202 here, and today I will be continuing Engines of Metro North. This time I will be talking about the Budd Special Purpose Vehicle, or SPV-2000. Now, without further ado, let's get started. In 1962, Budd had just built the last rail diesel car they would ever produce. The Budd Rail Diesel Car, or RDC, proved to be a successful rail car for the railroads of the time, as it was cheap to operate, reliable, and easy to maintain. Budd had designed the RDC in 1949, and in the years since, every railroad that wanted RDCs had purchased them. Few railroads wanted to replace their earlier RDCs as they were perfectly reliable, and with falling demand, Budd ended the production of the model. In 1965, the U.S. Department of Transportation was looking for a high-speed train for operation on the Pennsylvania Railroad's electrified main line from New York City to Washington, D.C. Budd's proposed design was chosen, and the U.S. Department of Transportation ordered 50 Metroliners from Budd. Ultimately, the Metroliner was unreliable and not well suited to high-speed operation, and the model was ultimately a failure. The Metroliner's interior space and comfort were unrivaled in the railroad industry, since, at the time, railcars were still made of heavy metal and heated by steam. The Metroliner's comfort and sleek look was its main selling point. The operator Amtrak, who had taken over intercity service from the Pennsylvania Railroad, had little success in operating them due to their unreliability. Amtrak wanted to expand Metroliner service as it was extremely popular, but did not want to put up with the reliability issues that the cars frequently suffered. Amtrak then placed an order for 57 unpowered Metroliner cars, which would eventually be named amfleet cars. The spacious and comfortable interiors were still present, but the cars were much more reliable as they were now pulled by locomotives. Amtrak ordered more and more amfleets from Budd, and currently possesses 642, which still are in active service. In the 1970s, Budd RDCs still made up the backbone of most railroads' passenger services, but the railcars were 25 years old. Railroads wanted to expand and upgrade their fleets of Budd diesel multiple units. Budd decided to produce new multiple units for these railroads, and Budd started a design process based on what they learned from their RDC. Budd used the amfleet as the base for these cars, due to their interior comfort and success on Amtrak. A prototype of these new cars was seen testing around Pennsylvania as early as 1977. The prototype had a fiberglass streamlined nose. The public saw this unit testing around the state and had no idea what to expect from it. The result of this process was the amfleet-based successor to Budd's famous RDC, the Special Purpose Vehicle, into the year 2000. The model was unveiled to the public on February 9, 1978. At Philadelphia's 30th Street Station. The SPV-2000 looked like an amfleet, with modified front and rear ends to accommodate operators' cabs. It also had an expanded roof section, just like the earlier RDC, to accommodate radiators for the twin diesel engines, which were mounted under the floor. The SPV-2000 looked like it was going to be a success. The cars measured 85 feet 4 inches long and 10 feet 6 inches long, the same dimensions as the amfleets they were based on. The cars were 14 feet 6 inches tall, which is 22 inches taller than the amfleet due to the expanded roof. The SPV-2000 had two General Motors 360 horsepower diesel engines for a total of 720 horsepower per car. The engines drove all 4 axles of the car through drive shafts and transmissions. The cars had a weight of 127,000 pounds, which was much heavier than the RDC, but with even more powerful engines, it still had lackluster performance when accelerating and decelerating. The cars had a top speed of anywhere from 80 to 120 miles per hour, depending upon the specification that the railroad ordered. After being unveiled in Philadelphia, Budd sent the prototype around the country, hoping that it would gather interests and orders from other railroads. The vehicle was proposed for use on several routes across the U.S. The cars were considered for use in a new Cape Cod rail service, and despite the prototype running several demonstration trips along the line, nothing came of this. The special purpose vehicle would commonly be proposed for use on several new commuter lines across the U.S., but nothing would ever come of this interest. The vehicle only ended up attracting orders from 4 operators. The Federal Railway Administration purchased a single SPV-2000 and converted it into a track geometry car. It was used in active service until 2000, when it was sold to Caltrain, where it still operates today, just not under its own power. Budd also sold 6 SPVs to the state-owned railways of Morocco for use on the King's Royal Train. These 2 orders were not enough to prove the model's success, So again in 1979, Budd sent a demonstrator around the country, again hoping for more orders. Budd marketed the SPV 2000 as a cheap way to operate high-speed services across unelectrified lines, often comparing the operating costs, cornering speeds, and acceleration rates to locomotive-hauled coach sets in brochures. Then in 1980, the Connecticut Department of Transportation purchased 13 SPV 2000s from Budd and leased 12 of them to Amtrak for use on their Springfield line, with the remaining one being assigned to Danbury brand shuttle service on Metro North. As the SPV 2000s were basically just powered amfleet cars, they were interoperable with that equipment. Oftentimes, an SPV 2000 that had arrived in New Haven from Springfield would be coupled onto the rear of a Washington-bound train to be able to provide through service between the two cities. In 1981, Metro North also placed an order for SPV 2000s. They purchased 10 for a total cost of $12 million and used them primarily on the Hudson line between Croton Harmon and Poughkeepsie in shuttle service. The vehicles made their first run on October 17, 1981. So far, Budd had produced 30 SPV 2000s for 4 different railroads. There was one big problem with the SPV 2000. The vehicle did not comply with union regulations since, at the time, any self-propelled vehicle with more than 44 tons of weight on the drive axles required a fireman to be positioned in the unit. As the SPV 2000 weighed 58 tons with all of that weight on drive axles, it therefore required a fireman, which increased the operating cost that the vehicle was supposed to decrease. Rather than pay the salary of another person or retire the units, Metro North and the Connecticut Department of Transportation had other ideas. The railroads removed the drive shafts from 2 of the railcar's axles, leaving only 2 of the 4 axles powered. This modification led the 720 horsepower originally intended for 4 axles to go to just 2, which the railcar was never designed for. This caused wheel slip to be a common occurrence and a problem for engineers operating them. This also placed extra stress on the mechanical transmissions that drove the wheels and could cause them to fail more frequently. This, however, was not the only mechanical issue suffered by the model. The SPV 2000 became infamous for their breakdowns. It was not uncommon for an SPV 2000 to operate with just one engine and therefore axle-driven. This led the SPV in the name to more realistically mean seldom-powered vehicle, as the cars were often pulled by more reliable locomotives. Amtrak sent 2 of their SPV 2000s, numbered 998 and 999, back to Budd for dozens of modifications. These modifications did little to help the catastrophic unreliability of these models, and the deferred maintenance by their operators didn't help either. This was in contrast to the SPV 2000's predecessor, the Budd RDC, many of which still operate just as reliably as they always did, almost 60 years after they were built. The cars were often described as defective by several media outlets, and commuters, railroads, and maintenance staff were frustrated with the vehicles. The railroads were doing everything they could to try and fix them, but they ultimately just gave up and destined them to be pulled by locomotives for the rest of their lives. Budd did not sell any more SPV 2000s, but since they anticipated the model's success and growth, they produced 14 incomplete shells that were never purchased. All of the development, marketing, and repair costs, in addition to the cost of manufacturing the 14 incomplete shells, took a toll on Budd as a company. The company only managed to sell 30 to try and recoup those costs, and it did not do them much good. This railcar put Budd in a financial position from which they would never recover. Amtrak replaced the SPV 2000s in 1984, which was before they retired their much older RDCs. Some of the Amtrak SPVs saw service on Metro North, but ultimately the railroad had enough and retired them in 1990, before Metro North retired their RDCs. The SPV 2000s were stored in New Haven Yard without much of a purpose, until a commuter service run by the Connecticut Department of Transportation named Shoreline East needed more passenger cars. The Connecticut Department of Transportation reached a deal with Amtrak to have the 12 remaining cars depowered at the railroad's Wilmington, Delaware shops. The Connecticut Department of Transportation was now in possession of 4 cab cars and 7 coaches made out of their SPV 2000s. These newly refurbished railcars would be referred to as Constitution liners, and they would be used on Shoreline East until the railroad acquired new masts for coaches from Virginia Railway Express in 2004. The 12 Constitution liners were left without a home once again. 2 are preserved. Metro North 293 and Condot 1001 are currently on display at the Danbury Railway Museum. The rest sat in New Haven Yard again, and they are used as backup cars for Metro North services, but then the remaining 10 cars were sent to New Orleans for hurricane standby duty, hoping the day where they will return to service will never come. The special purpose vehicle into the year 2000 was rarely self-powered, but it did make it into the year 2000, just not in its original form. The special purpose vehicles were only good for their body and interior, just like normal amfleets. Their failure is one in the series of many that led to the failure of their manufacturer, Budd. But they could have been great and a perfect replacement for the Budd RDC, but ultimately the RDCs that are still in service power themselves. And it is all about the Budd SPV 2000, a unique vehicle that didn't exactly work out the way anyone would have hoped. If you liked that video, like it, and if you love it, please subscribe. And if you disliked it, you can do that too, and leave a comment for anything else. And I hope to see you in the next video. Goodbye.